everyone. Thank you for coming. I'd like to call the meeting to order and ask Clerk Saladino to call the roll for both the Village Board and Plan Commission.
Trustee Augustine.
Here.
Trustee Gale.
Here.
Trustee McGee. Trustee O'Brien.
Here.
Trustee Peterson.
Here.
President Kukler.
Here.
Chairman Pace.
Here.
Commissioner Hoffenberg.
Here.
Commissioner Mosher.
Here.
Commissioner Schwartz. Commissioner Sarah. Commissioner Walls.
Here.
Commissioner Wenting.
And with that, we do have a quorum. I do expect Commissioner Schwartz to come momentarily, and Trustee McGee and Commissioner Sarah are unable to attend tonight's meeting. If possible, I'd ask Clerk Saladino to lead everyone in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, and we're going to get started almost immediately with our consultants and working together with the board and the Plan Commission as this initial step. But at this time, under the rules of the Open Meetings Act, I'm going to change the agenda and allow public comments. Anyone in the public that would like to comment tonight will be allowed to do so at this time. I would ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes, and you would need to speak into the microphone. So again, you'll go to the podium. If there's more than one, I'd ask you just to line up so that we know who's next. And again, anyone from the public that would like to comment, now is your time. And please state your name.
Good evening. My name is Peg Moster, and I'm with the League of Women Voters of the La Grange area, as well as, and their housing committee, as well as the La Grange Citizens Task Force on Housing. And I want to congratulate you on approaching this. I think it's well overdue, and as we read about housing issues across the nation, one of the things that comes up constantly is the issue of zoning and how it affects availability, how it affects expansion of villages and communities, and I think this is a wonderful opportunity for the village to be forward-thinking. So thank you very much. I look forward to the outcome.
Thank you.
I thought originally, my name's John Pluto, I'm a resident of the town, that they were going to have the public comment at the end of this.
Yeah, on the agenda, it was at the end. I thought it'd be best to put it at the first so that, again, if anybody has comments.
We can't really get a feel for what's going on out in the audience because you people know what you're going to talk about, but we don't. Could we comment on what you guys bring up at the meeting? I think that would be a fairer aspect of how we could look at this.
No, but you could, well, a couple of things. No. Secondly,
on your agenda, it said at the end of the meeting, after what you guys were going to talk about. So now you're changing the agenda.
I am.
And you think that's right?
You don't want to let me answer, so I'm going to let you speak for your 3 minutes.
Why don't you let the people out here tell you whether they want to speak now or they'd like to speak after you guys speak? I think that would be the fair thing to do. You do whatever you like. It's on you, Mark.
I'm sure I'll see you Monday night. You'll have your 3 minutes then. Seeing no other comments, we'll move on from public comments. Tonight's topic, the La Grange zoning code, was last comprehensively updated in 1993. This week, we are beginning the process of an update to modernize the code, implement many of the recommendations of the La Grange Forward Comprehensive Plan, simplify code administration, and establish rules that are clear, practical, and reflective of the village's character. Like any planning effort, the success of this project requires the involvement of many different community members. For those in the audience tonight, I want to take the opportunity to promote our community open house that will happen next Thursday, August 27th, from 6 to 7:30. At the open house, you'll have the opportunity to share your perspectives on a variety of zoning topics and learn more about the code update project from our consultant team, just like the trustees and commissioners will do here tonight. It's a drop-in event, so come by when it works best for your schedule. With that, I'd like to turn things over to our consultant team and John Hussel of the Hussel Laverne for their presentation.
All right, so first of all, thanks for giving up a beautiful evening. It's nice weather, and it's gorgeous outside. Mr. President and Chairman of the Planning Commission and to the board, thanks for having us here at this joint session. I'm also encouraged by the number of residents that have shown up this evening to sort of like pretty eager to this as we kick this project off. This will be about an 18-month endeavor. This is just the very, very, very beginning of that process. But over the course of the next year and a half, there will be a number of opportunities for everybody to participate. Again, my name is John Housey. I'm a partner and co-founder of Housey Levine Associates. With me is Nicole Campbell and Jessica Eccles. They've been out here the last couple of days. They've done a driving tour of the village, the community development staff. They've been conducting some one-on-one.
Let me just cut you off 1 second. You're going to have to use the microphone, even though because it's being you filmed and broadcast and everything else. So for that purpose, we need the microphones. And that'll go for anybody that's speaking. Again, you're going to need to speak into a microphone.
Sounds good. You guys hear me okay? Okay, good. Louder? Okay. I'm one in 9 kids. I talk really fast and really loud. It's usually not been an issue. But if I get going too fast, tell me to slow down. That's usually a bigger issue. So we're beginning this process over the last couple of days. Jessica and Nicole. Nicole is the day-to-day project manager working directly with Community Development Department staff, and I'll be providing principal oversight for the entire project. Nicole, Jessica, and I have worked, and our rest of our team have worked with zoning projects and planning projects all over the United States. I'm very familiar with this community and La Grange. I've lived for almost the last 30 years in River Forest. Very similar structure, neighborhood block, historic homes, very, very similar community character. So we're used and adept to working in communities like La Grange. That said, what we're going to go through is a little bit about what the process is, get a little bit of feedback, and get some discussion going from the village board and the plan commission. You're the policy guide for the community. You set village policy. As plan commission, you're sort of that front line when people come to you for entitlement or relief or development review and approval. It then goes to the village board for consideration. So at the beginning of the project, we always like to have a joint meeting if possible, so these two groups who represent the entire village can give us some thoughts, some feedback, what they're initially thinking before we even start the project. And we think that's really important. And there'll be a number of opportunities throughout the process for not only elected and appointed officials, but business owners and residents and neighborhood groups to participate as well. Again, we're just kicking things off. So here's my remote. Very good. He's actually driving the bus here. The purpose is just to introduce the project and the team, to get some initial feedback on what's working, what's not working, as we approach this update. The agenda is to go through sort of the introduction, a discussion of some of the issues and opportunities, and then what the next steps are in this process. So an important thing to remember is, and the president just talked about the comprehensive plan that was recently adopted. Comprehensive plan and zoning work hand in hand. They have to dovetail with one another, but they're not the same thing, not at all. A comprehensive plan is a policy guide that provides a community vision on how the community of La Grange is going to grow over time, what types of land use you would like where, how to begin to stabilize and improve your already existing neighborhoods, how to continue to have a thriving downtown area, how to provide different types of residential that you want to see that you may not have here to the level that you want, how to have good facilities and open spaces. The comprehensive plan establishes how you plan to grow, how you plan to improve, the type of development you'd like to see in certain areas, the character of development you would like to see in different areas, parts of the village you want to remain the same, and parts of the village you may want to see change or evolve over time. The comprehensive plan lays out a map for all of that, but it does not regulatory. The comprehensive plan does not define what you can and cannot do with property. The zoning code is regulatory. The zoning code is the thing that says how you can use your property, how you can build on your property, how you get approval to develop your property, et cetera, how you use and how you develop the property in the village. So they have to go hand in hand. With the new comprehensive plan recently adopted, it's the perfect time to go through and update your zoning to make sure it's delivering on the plan. This community did a lot of work with a lot of community input and a lot of stakeholder and resident feedback to make sure they got the comprehensive plan just right. And what you don't want to have is a comprehensive plan that says one thing and an older zoning code that doesn't align with that. Because over time, your comprehensive plan may not be realized. If your zoning is written correctly, it will help you realize your plan over time. So it's the perfect time to begin to update your zoning code. Some of the themes that were in the comprehensive plan that the village adopted, and you all know this, to restructure and streamline the village's zoning framework. People do not engage with the zoning ordinance for fun. Nobody's doing that unless you're on my team and you're a consultant. But most people don't engage with zoning for fun. People engage with zoning when they need some kind of approval to do something, to rezone a piece of property, to potentially open a business that might need a conditional use, to get a little bit of a variance to do an addition to an historic home, or any one of a number of things. And at that time, they have to engage the village, likely through either the ZBA, the Plan Commission, and the village board, to get approval so they can do something. And a big part of that is, does the zoning code work well for everybody in that pipeline? Does it work well for the resident? Does it work well for the developer? Does it work well for the local business, the mom and pop, as well as the big guy? Does it work for the Plan Commission? Does it work for village board? And is it something that staff can effectively manage? It has to provide fair certainty for everybody. So everybody knows what the rules are. It's as streamlined and as easy as possible, and it works for all of those different parties. Delivering the vision of the plan, to strengthen the downtown and key corridors, to consolidate and modernize commercial and office districts. You all know that retail is changing rapidly, right? The restaurant market is changing rapidly. The industrial markets are changing rapidly. These are things, the world doesn't wait for the city to change its codes. Markets change quickly. And you want to make sure you're capturing the best of what the market has to offer, and you're not a landing pad for the things that you don't want to see here. So you have to make sure that the zoning recalibrates to new market conditions. So that's a big part of what the plan recommended. To align residential standards with your existing character. La Grange in the Chicago regional area and across the country is known for having an amazing neighborhood character. And it's different in different neighborhoods of the community, but collectively, it's one of the defining DNAs of your community, is the rich character, the architecture, the cadence of open space, the tree canopy of your neighborhoods. So a big part of the plan was, how do we begin to align standards that protect and enhance that existing character? Establish a tiered design review process. And again, certain things you want to make sure the design is appropriate. You're not looking to dictate architecture. You're not looking to dictate design. There's phenomenal architects out there. There's phenomenal designers out there. You want to let them do their job. But you want to ensure a minimum threshold of quality and appropriateness, no matter what's being proposed. So here we have screen beam 259B4. No. It's all right. So again, I'll just keep going. But you want to make sure that development that takes place is appropriate and reflective of La Grange. You don't care what they're doing in Oak Park. You don't care what they're doing in Naperville. You don't care what they're doing someplace else. It has to work for you, not someplace else. And that's a big part of design guidelines. So all of these things are components that were called out in the comprehensive plan. While that's coming up, I'll use my cheat sheet. The next one is to compliance with legal requirements and reflective of modern best practices. Like I said, development practices move fast. Construction methods move fast. Architectural styles for new industrial and commercial uses move fast. Codes don't typically keep up with that. This is a chance to get those on the right page. And the next one is legal requirements. There have been some legal changes in the state and federally that this code will have to comply with. We can't ignore state requirements. An example of which is your sign code. A few years back, there was a Supreme Court case, Reed v. Gilbert, that said you can't regulate signage based on content. And as soon as that hammer came down at the Supreme Court level, about 98% of sign codes across the country became needing to be redone because most regulated signage, at least in part, by content. And you can't do that anymore. And so we had to make sure that's an example. That's one thing we have to go back and make sure your sign code is compliant with federal law. And there are other things that need to be compliant with state law. The last one is to make the code easier to administer, and that's for you guys, to navigate, and that is for residents, business owners, developers, architects, and apply. And that means the Plan Commission and the Village Board knows how to apply these rules to anybody that comes forward. The name of the game is fair certainty. With reasonable expectation, everybody should know what they can and cannot do with their property and the rules by which they can get something approved. And it needs to be as clear and as concise as possible. So this is our scope of work right here. And again, it's a 7-step scope of work. Project initiation, which is where we are right now. We'll be entering into step 2 is community engagement. We'll be doing community engagement on the front end, but we do it throughout the process. But step number 2 is where we sort of set it up for the entire process. Existing code analysis and preliminary recommendations. One of the first things we will do is go through your existing zoning ordinance and highlight the good, the bad, the ugly. And we will do that against how well it is delivering on your comprehensive plan, how well it is aligned with your other planning documents and guidelines, how well it is or is not meeting other federal or state regulations that have changed since the last time it has been done, and what is or is not reflective of national best practices and market conditions. The woman who spoke very first up at the podium talked about housing. That's one of the things that has changed rapidly across the country, and codes have to recalibrate to capture that. And then the next thing I'm going to talk a little bit about here is districts and uses. Then we'll get into site and building and design standards, subdivision code, sign standards, and the draft and final ordinance. We deliver these in pieces. And this goes for the village board, the plan commission, and everybody in the audience. And I know this is a meeting for the Village Board and Plan Commission, but I want to make sure everybody is on board with this. Zoning seems complicated. It's not, all right? And when you think about it, I want you to think about it primarily as 3 buckets of stuff, right? The first bucket is what almost everybody thinks zoning is, and that's around zoning districts. My zoning is this. What can I do on my property? What uses can I do, and how can I build? But it's districts, district standards for building, and districts uses, what you can and cannot do. And that's by zoning, is R1, R2, B3, C, whatever. It's by district. So district uses and district standards. And that's what most people engage zoning. What can I do? What can't I do? The next one isn't about districts. It's about design standards. Parking lots exist all over. What should the design of parking lots be? How many parking spaces should be required? Lighting, signage, landscaping. These are things that are not necessarily district specific. These are design standards that should apply no matter where that thing exists in the village. So they're often called standards of general applicability, but they're the standards that supersede district specificity. So the first one is districts, uses and standards. The next one is design and development standards that could apply everywhere. And the last one is maybe the least fun piece, but I think the most important and often overlooked, and that is the administrative piece. How do you get stuff done? You could get the districts perfect, and you could have the best design. And if your processes and procedures aren't good, people will grow increasingly frustrated trying to use the code. right? It won't provide the guidance or the procedures you need or applicants need to get things accomplished and to get things built and to come out of the ground. So district standards and uses is the first chunk. The next one is design and development standards, like parking lots, lighting, landscaping, signage. And then the last one is administrative procedures. How do you get things done? So think of zoning in those buckets. So when we get into drafting the code, we'll be delivering them in those buckets, all right? Then at the end, it'll all come together. Throughout the course, I talked about engagement. So here's our scope of work broken out by sort of season, right? Summer, fall, winter, and we go through them. And then off to this side, we talk about the different outreach things that are being proposed during that phase of the zoning process. So everything is open to the public. So if it's in black, it's a meeting like this, but the public is welcome to attend. Everything's going to be transparent. Everything is open. So if the text is in black here, this is sort of a formal meeting or like that. Public is always welcome. The things that are in blue are geared toward outward facing, not meeting related engagement. So website, online questionnaires, engagement dashboards, focus group discussions, community campaigns, open houses. Then when we get into the zoning analysis, we get into more community campaigns and open houses. We do those campaigns and open houses throughout. And then when we get to the end, we have a story map, which is like an online summary of the document. We will be doing a brochure highlighting and summarizing all the changes that are made so you know section by section. You don't have to wonder, like, what did they do? We will summarize all of it in a graphic document. We'll be having a third campaign or a fourth campaign with more open houses and public hearings and then adoption meetings. So at every step along the way where we are producing something, know that we've worked on it, we've reviewed it with staff, we've dialed it in based off of staff feedback in the back and forth. We then come to this group, we talk about it and get it right at this group, and then it goes out to the larger public and we get feedback from them. Nothing is final to the end of the 18-month and we get down here to the public hearing and adoption. Everything up to that point, all this engagement is just to discuss things, to try to see if we got it right or we have to change it. But nothing gets adopted till the very, very end. Okay? So what we're going to jump into now is, so that's the process. Does anybody have any questions about the process or the procedures we're going to go through or why we're doing this right now with the village? Okay? So the next thing is sort of issues and opportunities, and this is a chance for me to talk less and you to talk more. So we're going to sort of zero some of our talking points around or discussion points around housing in neighborhoods, non-residential development, site and building design, and then that review process for getting things done. So these are sort of the general, and we could talk about anything, but these are sort of the buckets of things we're going to frame some of the discussion around. Go ahead. Yeah. Okay, so in the comprehensive plan, you're distinctly a community that has a lot of established, beautiful, single-family, detached residential neighborhoods, right? It's a defining characteristic, but it is not the definitive characteristic. You have a lot of duplexes, you have quadplexes, you have triplexes, you have small apartment buildings, you have a lot of different types of residential components that comprise the neighborhoods of La Grange. It's not all just one thing. And so to your point, man, when you came up, this is the perfect time to begin to look at housing issues and how we can potentially change the zoning code to better deliver the housing that meets the needs of current and future La Grange populations, right, residents. So there are several different types of housing, and these are just pictures of some of them. Single-family detached, triplexes, townhomes, multifamily, duplexes, cottage courts, multifamily of a larger scale. You have examples of all of this. And your comprehensive plan did a very dialed in and focused job of saying what areas of the community some of these things exist, the areas where you would like to keep them, the areas where you might want to consider slightly higher densities in a couple of the districts, how you can do a better job in your code of ensuring that it is a soft density that is more reflective of adjacent residential uses that might be of a lesser density and respectful of the character of those neighborhoods. But the first thing we want to talk about, or I throw out to you, is to begin to talk about any issues, thoughts, concerns, ideas around these different types of housing in the village and things that we should keep in mind or that you might want to begin to think about as we start this process. So I'll open it up to you. Anybody? Any thoughts on?
I'll
Go
just
ahead.
start out, and I hate to start out negatively, but I will. I'm not sure where cottage courts are, where we would consider cottage courts existing, I guess, in the village currently.
Okay. And at this point, it may be, even if they don't, is it something the village would want to entertain the idea of? And this gets back to, does the mix of residential products match what you would likely want to see or need to have in the future? So the comprehensive plan does a pretty good job of stating some of the things. I just jotted them down here. Let's see here. Like potentially increasing the density in the R5, keeping the higher density that's already established in the R6, but to focus on soft density in some of these areas. To begin to have 2 unit per lot in the R5, to keep it the same in the R6, and to come up with some design guidelines for, you have them now for duplexes, but you don't have them for triplexes and quadplexes. So the comprehensive plan got pretty granular on things they thought the zoning ought to examine going forward. So I guess currently right now, is there any issues that you see with the way the village is currently handling these? Or is there a type of residential product that you don't currently have that you would like to consider maybe going forward to achieve some of these densities? Or products that you currently have that you may not want to see anymore of, but maybe consider something else? Yeah.
I got a point. One of the things that isn't on there is the mixed use in commercial areas. The old-fashioned people live above the store and shop in the neighborhood.
Right.
And I'm very much in favor of that. But we don't specifically call it out, but there are opportunities, I suppose, in favoring it in certain areas.
Yeah, absolutely there are. Absolutely there are. And this focuses on purely residential, but you're right, the one component of residential that isn't on this slide is mixed-use residential. And historically considered mixed use is vertical stratification of uses in a building, where the ground floor is traditionally retail or shop or some sort of restaurant, and the floors up above are residential, like a traditional downtown, like an old traditional downtown. So absolutely, I think that is something that this zone, you have some of that in town, and it's something that we need to make sure that we accommodate well. And the potential would be, do we want to have more areas for that, or re-examine how you currently provide for those uses? But that character exists very much in La Grange right now. Yeah, I would agree.
Playing on what Glenn is saying, do we want to have that represented on this housing types chart? So should that be in this chart? Should that be added? Do we want to make
Sure,
sure
we can
we're
do that.
capturing all types so that when we're looking at, the picture, we're
Sure, we can do that
looking
for
at
sure.
examples?
Yep.
And just to follow up on that, I think especially as we're looking at developing south of 47th
Right.
on La Grange Road, that seems like maybe a perfect area for it. So again, that's why I think we want to make sure that that the Plan Commission, the board, is expressing that we're interested in that.
Correct. And that would be extending some of those uses you have now, but into different areas, like further south on La Grange Road. And some of the nice things about things like, we've worked in communities where you drive through a single-family neighborhood and they have duplexes and triplexes and quadplexes. You don't even know that they're not single-family detached homes. They've done very well because the zoning is really dialed in to deliver those. But you're exactly right. So and your plan calls out for the exploration of these types of uses, some of them extending beyond further south on La Grange Road. So, all right, we can go to the next slide. So and this just begins to touch at, if we're going to explore these uses that you have now, some you have design standards for, some you don't. I believe the design standards exist for duplexes, correct? But it doesn't exist right now for triplexes or quadplexes, is that right? Right. So we would probably want to, if we're going to allow these uses, and we do, make sure that we have the same level of standards to ensure that what gets delivered is in character of the community and not something that is not. So these are examples of graphics that we did for another community where they were looking to put in some of these other types of uses into historic single-family neighborhoods, and some of the renderings that we did in the ordinance to show how that could or could not take place.
Do we allow triplexes and quadplexes currently?
They would be allowed in the multifamily districts.
Yeah, right now in the R6, right? Okay. So we'd want to make sure, and the comprehensive plan calls out for sort of dialing in some of the different design standards. And the difference, and this is an important note too, and this is a trend that we're seeing nationally. There's a few, and I'll get into some of the other ones as they come up. But historically, a lot of communities had design guidelines for these things. Design guidelines could be ignored legally, a lot of them. It would be, you could say like, well, we looked at your design guidelines, but we weren't able to like really meet all of them. So what most states are trending toward is going through and examining their design guidelines and making them design standards, things that have to be done. And again, we're not looking to dictate architectural style, but to ensure that anything that comes out of the ground does match the character of the neighborhoods and where some of these things are going to go. So. The other thing is, you know, besides the actual building itself, but what are the design features that make a neighborhood feel more comfortable? And neighborhoods aren't just single-family homes or even duplexes or triplexes. There's multifamily, there are schools, there are parks, there are public facilities. There's a lot of different things that make a neighborhood more than just a single-family home. But to talk about some of the compatible building materials, you have a beautiful housing inventory. So building materials are rapidly changing. There's some you may not want to see proliferate in your neighborhoods, but there's some that you may want to have be more common because they're great materials. Four-sided architecture, so buildings that might be adjacent to these neighborhoods aren't looking good just when viewed straight on, because people walk around stuff, they drive by stuff. And your historic architecture and most of your new architecture is good when viewed from all four sides. To increase the variety of housing types, variety of housing sizes, to de-emphasize the garage. We've all driven through communities where you drive down the street and it's just garage doors. And then when you come back to La Grange, you're thankful you live in La Grange because you don't have streets that just look like a bunch of garage doors. So design standards that de-emphasize garages, more enhanced landscaping, location of fencing and walls, and proximity to goods and services. These are all things that the zoning can address and emphasize or encourage or decourage or provide disinvestment for. So. You need one of those little mouse mover machines. You just put it on the mouse pad and it moves the arrow around. Huh? Yeah, any discussion at all about things that you think are important for the zoning to focus on that may be problem areas now or issues that have come up from residents in the past that they think zoning potentially could address to make the neighborhoods a better places to live over the way they are right now? Any repeat issues that come up? What are the things, I guess let me ask this, what are the things that come up as frequent variation or variance requests? What are the most common ones? Yeah, right here.
Yeah, that would be,
Microphone, Peg.
That would be corner lots.
In setbacks on corner lots? Or,
Setbacks on corner lots where, how big the structure can be, also the fencing of corner lots. That's a recurring theme.
okay. So yeah, and those are things that we have up here, the fencing. And so corner lots are unique. If you notice in a lot of historic communities, corner lots are bigger than the rest of the lots on the block. Historically, they were called keystone lots. And it's because they have two frontages. So in a lot of historic neighborhoods, the corner lots are bigger and the homes are often bigger because they sort of like were these thresholds into the neighborhood at the end of each block, but they have double frontages. So they have a bigger frontage on one side, the sort of the corner side yard. So, okay. Any other issues that come up in the neighborhoods that pop up now and then that residents might raise? Yeah.
In particular, I've heard from some folks in some of the historic district and older parts of town that there's an increase in design that has the connected garage.
Right.
Connected to the front. So like you were saying before about maybe de-emphasizing that. So some of them have to happen around the side of the house, so the front of the house matches kind of the block. And then, but there are people that have said, why do we allow them to be connected to the front? They should be, this is a driveway back to the garage community.
Right.
So it's nothing that really boils people's, blood, but it is the thing that you don't think about until someone does that to maybe a house on your street, is that now there's two cars parked in what is otherwise this span of front yards, this view when you're looking up and down the street. So I think that's where people have come to me with, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and some of this is going to be reflective of, again, those are, and I'll say this a lot, that code is easy to write. You have to sort of zero in on consensus on what you want to allow, not allow, or what you want to incentivize, right? And that's a big deal. I live on a block where an older home was torn down maybe about 14 years ago, and there's an alley behind my block, so everybody has detached garages, and a builder bought that lot, tore down the house, didn't utilize the alley, and has a 3-car garage coming off and put in a driveway right off the front street, and that garage is now in the front. So in a neighborhood where every home is like that, doesn't stand out, but in a historic neighborhood, that sort of stuff stands out. So we can write those. I've seen, and we've worked in communities where we have given incentive that if it was on the side or at the rear, they used FAR to control the size of homes. They granted an additional 400 square feet in FAR, which is a 20 by 20 garage. So, but they would allow a 400 or 500 square foot bigger home if the garage was in the back, attached or detached. They didn't care, but they just didn't want it visible from the street. And if you were willing to do that, they would let you have a bigger house. Porches is another one. If you were willing to have a front porch that wasn't token, it had to be at least half the width of the front of your house, and it had to be at least, I think, 7 or 8 feet deep, so it was a usable porch. And if you did that, they gave you a larger FAR to build your house because it had some of the features that were disappearing as homes got bigger. So it didn't say you have to, but if you did some of the development things that were more representative of the character of the neighborhood, you got incentive to do it by allowing you to build a bigger house. And that has worked in some communities really well. So it doesn't require them to do that, but it's an incentive. So we can look at things like that if there's a desire.
And staying on the topic of garages, I think one thing that we've seen several times is this idea of what is acceptable for people being able to put space above the garage. More people are working from home. This is about, we're talking about this as times changed. What do you do to update the code with working habits changing, more people working from home? I mean, I get a lot of conversations and questions about this from residents in the neighborhood, but we've also seen this in front of the commissions as well, as what constitutes a living abode versus can I just work there? What kind of electricity am I allowed to run? What kind of plumbing am I allowed to run? And there seems to be a lot more requests. If I could just have an office above my garage, that would make my life a lot easier and to live in the village.
Yep.
So,
Yeah,
I think,
and to that end as well, that leads to the question of accessory dwelling units, right? Which is a real hot topic in cities all over the United States. Every city that we work in, it's an issue. Some love them, some don't. Some are trying them without much reg as of right. Some have a lot of regulations. But again, that is a policy decision. Once the decisions have been made, and this is, and I tell my staff this, and they laugh at this, we work with some really complex issues in some communities, and they can repeat my mantra. But I'll often say the best way to talk about zoning, in most cases, is to not talk about zoning. And what I mean by that is, if we have a discussion about, we don't want detached structures getting too big. We want to be mindful of people having privacy in their backyard. So you don't want to have your backyard, your respite, your piece of life behind your house, and then have a huge structure in your neighbor's backyard with a balcony where people live up there looking down over your backyard, what used to be their backyard. Do you want to have accessory dwelling units that can be rented or leased out, or do you not? But do you want to accommodate an office? So then you don't put a kitchen facility out there. You can't live in it. So the first thing is to have a discussion about the issue. what you want to have, what you don't want to have, what your concerns might be, and then you talk about what you think might work, and then like, okay, we'll take a shot at drafting that code. We can deliver that consensus, and we'll bring you some options, right? But if you get into the weeds of the zoning too quickly, you're not having the discussion about what you want to achieve. The comprehensive plan knocks most of that stuff out of the park. It talks about policy on all this stuff, so the zoning can implement that. But issues like that, how big can a garage tall be? How do you want to use that second floor or floor space of a detached garage to give them rights, but to protect the privacy rights of a neighbor? That's a balance. So we can have those discussions, and we can bring you ideas to reflect whatever it is the village thinks it might want to see. We've written every example of that, yeah. So, all right, so the next one, it gets into sort of non-residential sites and building design. I talked about the residential neighborhoods being sort of one of the defining DNAs of your community. The other one is La Grange Road, your corridors, your commercial areas. They're really quite nice. But you've got, beyond just La Grange Road, you've got other commercial uses and industrial uses and service uses around the village. So which design elements should be prioritized for commercial and industrial? High-quality building materials, variety of building styles, variety of sizes, architectural compatibility, windows, zero lot line development, screening of mechanical equipment, improved landscaping, improved appearance. So aside from the residential discussion or uses, are there issues that are beginning to emerge or things that you would like to see addressed differently in your commercial areas? You've got some larger industrial sort of areas off on the east side of town. You've got La Grange Road commercial right in the core of your town. That's a different types of use. And some of your other intersections around town, you have what I would classify as smaller scale or sort of neighborhood commercial nodes that aren't the big stuff that you see on La Grange Road. But are there issues related to commercial or mixed use things that you see in town right now that you think are an issue, or that you think we ought to take a look at or re-examine, or anything related to some of the industrial or service areas that you have in town where issues may have arisen that we might want to address or take a look at doing something a little bit differently? What issues have popped to the surface that you might have around those things? Not residential, but other stuff.
Sure, I think it's extent of retail requirements for use in like the core commercial district. And it's kind of changed, like retail, like a purely retail space is really not something we're seeing a ton of. Yeah. And instead it's usually combined with some sort of service component. So it's, you know, fixing glasses, or it's stretch lab or things like that, where it has some retail, but it's not really retail. Like, you know, I don't think people are going to like the salt cave, you know, to buy salt materials. You know, we require them to have this frontage for retail, but it's really not drawing retail traffic. And so I just think that sort of mix has become a little antiquated.
Yeah, I think that's a very timely one. And I talked before, one of the earlier slides, we talked about the zoning code being potentially revised to reflect market trends and conditions. We all know that people, when it comes to retail and shopping, people are doing that more and more and more and more online. They're doing it from home, they're shopping, but when it comes to food, people are either eating out or ordering out or getting their food out more and more and more and more and more. So food establishments are increasing. Some of them are delivery only, some of them are small eat-in, delivery, pickup. But the number of food establishments relative to retail is increasing. The ratio is altering over the last 8 years pretty rapidly. And so communities are beginning to take a hard look at what retail versus service versus entertainment and what that mix is. So they're not foregoing opportunity for tenancy and vibrancy that may not be retail. So I think that's a real good thing to re-examine. That whole market and landscape has dramatically changed. And it used to be in a typical downtown, anecdotally, it was about 90% retail. You'd get about 5-10% restaurant. And if you got an entertainment use, you were lucky. That retail has dropped down to like 58-63%. Restaurant has bumped up to about 15, 18, 20%. And then experience or some sort of like engaging service or something else is the mix. So the mix has completely changed, and codes haven't caught up. So
I know you're going to cover parking in and of itself
We will,
later,
yeah.
but it's just, to me, it's worth mentioning again because it feels like every time we have meetings about non-residential site plans, we talk about parking every time, and we talk about whether or not it's current in terms of what the needs are versus what the code reflects. So to me, that's going to be a huge component
Absolutely.
that we're going to have to talk about because it comes up at every one of our meetings, and I feel like we always talk about it. And one thing that always gets said is, well, how much parking do they really need versus what the code requires? So I just thought it'd be worth pointing out. I know we're going to get to that, but it's, to me, a huge component because I didn't necessarily see it on the screen. But
It's not on this one. This is more about design, but you're exactly right. Historically, communities required too much parking for a lot of uses, especially because of markets have changed, right? So parking is getting recalibrated. And when it comes to parking in a downtown, 98.7% of all of our clients who we do downtown work for say there's not enough parking in the downtown. So we'll do an analysis of parking to retail space to service uses. And almost all the time, it turns out there is enough parking. It's just not in the right location or people don't know where it is. And I say this, and it reminds me of something Yogi Berra once said. He's like, nobody goes there anymore. It's way too crowded. And that's like a successful downtown. You don't want to go to a downtown and be able to park in front of the store you're going to right away without any effort or issue every time, because that just means nobody's your downtown. But if it gets to the point where you can't find a space, you'll quit going there because you can't. So it's a balance. You drive around the block a couple of times, you'll look for a spot. So parking is very, very nuanced. But with the mix of uses changing, parking is dramatically changing a lot. For residential, the requirements are coming down for different types of residential. For commercial, it tends to be reducing a little bit. And all this is about to be even further complicated with something the state of Illinois is currently considering right now, the People Over Parking Act. I don't know if you guys know what that is. So strap in. This is some more stellar legislation coming out of Springfield. It'll likely get revised a little bit, but that municipalities will not have the authority to require any parking for any use within a half mile of a transit station.
And both our metro stations qualify as a transit station.
Correct. So just for fun, yesterday I went on Google Earth and snapped a couple of circles in La Grange, and you won't have to worry about parking issues in your downtown because the state has determined you don't have to have any parking anywhere around there. I'm tongue-in-cheek joking, but yeah, so that's people over parking is the act. There's already pushback for people to say you've got to tweak this. I know what you're trying to do, but it's getting at it. The intent behind it primarily is a barrier to mixed-use development to get more housing in these areas near transit, and by reducing the parking requirement, you could get development that otherwise wouldn't go in because of parking requirements. So we'll see where that lands, but that's the thing now. That's a thing right now. Or if a developer wanted to come in and say, I'm doing a mixed-use development with 72 units right here on La Grange Road or a block away, they could come in and say, and we're not proposing any parking. They wouldn't do that because no one would buy the units or rent them, but it's legal in the state of Illinois now. So people over parking. So we'll have to deal with that as well. All right, so sustainable design, your conference.
Sorry, I had one thing.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Your previous slide was more about design and build, but since it was raised, and I imagine it will be discussed more in depth at a future meeting. It's like a real short microphone, so just bring it up. What some of the others over here had talked about, what just, considering more variety of what we allow. So we really want to unpack what we allow down to, we want to be careful. We want to keep it revenue generating. We want to keep it
Right.
Something that creates foot traffic, but we want to be more open-minded to a larger variety potentially of businesses, and right now we're pretty strict there. So obviously a lot of customers are buying stuff online, as you mentioned, but we've got a lot of restaurants, and we just want to figure out how we take care of a variety and not look so difficult to do things with and so strict and so rigid. We want
Right.
whether we approve things or not can be put into guidelines, what the kinds of things we want, but I think we want the perception to open up that we're willing to consider some things that we haven't
Right.
more recently, things that are different and popular in towns just like us, but that we don't allow. And then the other thing that is particular in terms of the non-residential site and building design, kind of in improved landscaping. We do have some properties, and I'm not going to call any out specifically, but they look like they're abandoned businesses.
Right.
And I don't know, we don't have any real easy way to enforce them. You should put some landscaping up, you should put some fencing up, that kind of thing, take care of your property. So, and these are high-profile businesses, in your schools that just don't want to do it, don't have to do it. It's hard to get in touch with the people who own the building. So, I would really like to see us try to ask for a level of just respecting your property, and for the commercials, and then commercials and non-residential sites in particular. And then the same goes for when a business decides, for whatever reason, they go out of business, they put up a lease sign or not, they let a permit lapse, and they just sit vacant with a sign falling in the window. Like,
Yep.
what are the kinds of things that we can do to, encourage that be developed or sold, or at least that there's a standard for how it must look while they're not operating as a business with respect to all the other businesses
Correct.
around them. I don't know if there are ways that we can do that, but I'd like to see it looked at.
Yes, short answer is yes, and both your comments are spot on. And I really like your first one is the code has to accommodate flexibility in accommodating businesses that may want to come to you. It can't be, historically, zoning ordinances often had use tables, and some of them would go like 15, 20 pages long because they try to enumerate every type of use. We worked on Oak Brooks years ago, and there was a thing that said telegraph machine repair facility was one of the uses. Well, no one was still using those machines, let alone a shop dedicated to repairing those machines. Helicopter landing pads from I don't know when, but so we've seen and so now you create categories of uses underneath headings that allow some interpretation and flexibility, not like the Wild West, but does your code right now, it might define an escape room. It defines an escape room. Or a lot of codes we work in, they don't. They're like, oh, what's that? I'm like, well, wait a few months, you'll likely get someone applying for one. Well, yeah. So how do you park that? How many employees does it have? What type of use does it generate? How is it categorized? So uses are changing all the time. So being flexible is crucial. It also is a little bit of a telegraphing to something we'll touch later. Another big trend that we're seeing nationally, and we're huge proponents of it, is finding ways when the standards are correct and better, giving more authority to staff to do administrative relief as long as conditions are met. So everything doesn't have to be a public hearing and a legal notice and a meeting at night. And some things they just sort of say like, hey, you did this, this, and this. We can approve that administratively. And that's a big trend we're seeing to get at some of the flexibility and responsiveness that you were getting at. And don't get me started on enforcement. I'm a big stickler on enforcement. And to me, it's the same as speeding. If you have a sign that says 35 miles an hour is the speed limit, and people routinely go bombing 80 miles an hour down the street, and everybody knows it and everybody does it, but they don't do anything about it, then take the 30 mile an hour speed limit signs down. Or enforce it, right? So you can write standards about grass height and fencing and dilapidation and peeling paint, condition of signs once the tenant has left, et cetera, and then, to be honest, you hammer enforcement and people will comply. If you don't hammer enforcement, people will not comply. So enforcement is really important. So my clicker moved. He's back there now. So the other thing that I think we can take a look at, and this can end up in a few different areas of the code or throughout, but sustainable design. And this can manifest in different things, whether it's wind energy, solar regulations, which we're writing a lot more and more and more of. Different sorts of things like a tree preservation or tree canopy ordinance codes. We've written some pretty creative preservation codes that look at tree canopy, not just trees, but canopy protection. Green energy, renewable energy, dark sky ordinances for lighting so it doesn't illuminate the sky just inadvertently, eliminating the night sky. How development can start having more bicycle amenities on private properties, businesses and public areas. Electrical vehicle charging stations, but all of these sorts of things, some are design, some are building, some are material, some have to do with parking, some have to do with energy, some have to do with landscaping and screening. But there are environmental best practices around all of this. And it doesn't mean that you have to do all or nothing. There's a lot of edges around here where you can, and this is also an area where you can incentivize these and not mandate these. So if someone comes to the plan commission with a development, you might have a standard for a plan development that says applicant has endeavored to provide at least 6 of the following 9 sustainable best practices. And you put them in there, then the onus is on the developer to say, here's how we've endeavored to make this application comply with some of your sustainable initiatives. And we were able to do 5, we weren't able to get to 6, but we think this 5 is really good for this location. And you can say, you've met the intent of the ordinance, we think this is a really good job. Given the constraints of your site, we think this is a huge improvement and you did a good job. So there are ways of incentivizing this as opposed to requiring it, because some sites, it is tough to mandate, and sometimes it's a differential between whether the development pencils out or not. So you've got to provide flexibility, but there are a lot of ways to make an already green community greener, and we can examine those with you. So, solar, we've written, I don't know how many across the country, solar standards are really getting pretty good. Wind is still all over the place. In small scale applications, it's really tough, right? So, but we do a lot of this. Any thoughts at all about any sustainable practices you'd like to see that you're seeing now that aren't going well, or things you would like to see that you're not doing now? Any thoughts? How many of you guys drive an EV? Let's start with that.
That was what I was gonna suggest. That was gonna be my comment. I think a lot of people do or know people who do, and if you do, then you travel and you know how important it is to find a community that has a charger somewhere.
Yep.
We've been talking about it for years. Big problem is because we have the problem of not having a lot of parking.
Correct.
So do we dedicate a space or 2 for that? I think we can, and I think we should. I think hopefully we will throughout this process. I think, it can be a revenue generator for us.
Yeah, for
So,
sure.
yeah.
And we're beginning to see that provision in a lot of our ordinances, as well as the provision in certain types of parking spaces or lots above a certain number or type of use providing EVs. But I've been driving around for a couple of years, so I'm very cognizant of that as well. So, all right. All right, here we go. We kind of touched on this already, right? So what's your biggest parking concern? So I would say, let's just throw it out there right now. Is, do you think you guys got parking nailed and it's just not an issue? Or are there areas of the community where it's a huge issue? Or what are your thoughts on parking? I'm curious. Did we skip a page? Oh, see, my clicker jumped ahead. Okay. Yeah, so here we go, yes. So, okay, we're gonna go back up. All right, so we're at signage. You have a lot of signage in town. Obviously, businesses need signage. But you can drive into a town where signage is done well or where signage is not done well. Like I said before, Reed v. Gilbert, which is a Supreme Court case, I bet it's 11 years old now, or 7 years old, 9 years old. That changed the way most people would, communities regulated signage by the structure of the sign, pole, monument, blade, profile, like the structure of the sign, and they regulated the structure. And the other thing they regulated by was the purpose of the sign, the name of the business, a directional sign, Eat at Joe's, and you now, like, I'll give you like, for a month leading up to an election and for 2 weeks after an election, you can have a political yard sign. We'll get you up to 3 political yard signs, right? Well, how do you know it's a political sign unless you read the content? You don't. So you can't regulate political signs. You can't regulate real estate signs. How do you know the sign is about real estate for sale unless you read the sign? Seems odd, right? Or let's say you're the local high school volleyball coach and you're a big booster, and I've got 5 signs in my yard that say, "Go volleyball team," or whatever, right? And so that's not a political sign, it's not a real estate sign, but so you call those yard signs, and you define how big they are and how many you can have. But you can't regulate them based on the purpose of the sign, right? So that's an example of where one example of where sign codes, when that decision was made a lot of sign codes not legal anymore, or those components legal anymore. So we have to go through your sign code as an example to make sure that you're not regulating by content. But you've got different sorts of, like one of the discussions that we've talked about was sort of these projecting signs as an example, and we show this here. I believe you don't allow pole signs in town anymore, right? So you got rid of that a while ago, is that correct? All right. And that's a pretty common thing now. Monument signs are typically the way most communities are going toward. Two that we often talk about is, do we want to have the sandwich board sign in your downtown? Can you do that so this downtown doesn't look junky? Because a lot of shops want them, some don't, because of the way it looks. But you can regulate them in a way where they look really nice, and it allows the flexibility for the mom and pop. The projecting sign. These are geared for the pedestrian. If you're driving down La Grange Road, for instance, and I look off to the side, I can see on the canopy or awning or the building the signage. But if I'm a pedestrian and I'm walking down the sidewalk with my daughter and she wants to get ice cream, can't look down the block and say, I think Sarah's ice cream is on this block, but I can't tell by looking down the block because there's no little blade or profile sign sticking out from the building. So a lot of pedestrian environments will have those that really only are even tactile from the pedestrian walking on the sidewalk in front of those buildings. They're quaint, they can be very nice. Some communities like them, some don't. If the idea is to explore them, we can deliver that code. But those are policy decisions around signage. So I guess and when we talk with businesses, as you can imagine, signage is very, very important to businesses. And I, as a business owner, I get that and respect it. But are there any issues around signage you have now where you think is good, areas where you think it might be problematic? I think your issue about signage when a tenant has leaved and the signage gets bad, like what do you do about that? But any thoughts at all on signage in La Grange? And anything we may want to address or discuss as we go through this going forward? No? All right. I think the next one's parking, but I'm not sure. No, I'm just kidding. So here's one again, and I'll just open it up to you. Parking issues in La Grange. Let's hear it. There's got to be some, right? Every community has them. So what are the ones you hear the most? Whether you agree with them or not, or what do you think?
I think our restaurant evening parking gets, as you said, full. I mean, I think you can always park within 2 blocks of any restaurant. People in La Grange, maybe everywhere in the suburbs, don't like to walk 2 blocks. So that can become an issue. I think also just generally our parking deck, and I think parking decks throughout the country can become an attractive nuisance or attraction area for, they're not even kids. There's some very grown men that bring their cars there for some unknown reason. And so that's a concern. We try to patrol it as best as possible, but it's why you wouldn't necessarily say, yes, we can put a deck here or put a deck there, because they come with some problems. So I think that balancing is a problem. But if you ask any of our restaurants, they would say parking's a real concern. We can't have more restaurants because there's no place for the current customers to park if we bring in more into town. And so I think everybody would agree that there's at least a perception of maybe a reality on that.
And that's the word you said, perception. That's a really important one, because if people perceive there to be a parking problem, that is a problem. Right? So, but to be able to say what you said, I think is a pretty amazing thing to be able to say, and a lot of communities can't. You can usually park within a couple blocks of the restaurant you want to go to. In a downtown, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. It means it's busy, but not too busy. You've got parking sort of distributed appropriately in surface lots in different locations. That's a pretty good tell, I think, for a downtown, to be able to say most of the time you can park within a couple blocks of the restaurant you want to go to. That's pretty good. And you've got really a lot of surface parking on the west side of the businesses you have on the west side of La Grange. And those, we come here periodically, and those, again, may take a little bit of driving around, but not a painful amount of driving around to park.
Yeah, I would say for parking on the west end, it's during the school year, school day, where it's a really big problem because there's not enough for the students, so they're coming into the business district, which affects those businesses. And those who rent there, who live in apartments that don't have parking, so they're very frustrated by the lack of opportunity for them. So, we're addressing those and working on those the best that we can. So that's an area, and then as President Kukler said, over here where the density of restaurants and the theater and things like that make it difficult, for a large part of the day, that's an issue. But I had a meeting with staff this morning, and we're working on a couple of social media posts that will be ongoing, and I know staff is working on new maps to let people know where all the surface lots are, what the hours are, and to push people and advise that they go there. But really, the parking garage here behind the building, which is not obvious,
Right.
there's almost always top level, if not a little bit lower than that. It's not a big trip up. So
No.
just to get people in the habit who live here to just start there first. That 99% of the time you're going to find something, then you don't have to worry
Yep.
about doing some laps and being frustrated. So I think we just wanted to start to work on changing people's habits. But those are kind of the areas that I think have opportunity for us. But it is a big deal for people who don't live here and don't know better. So we're trying to make the directional assistance for them to know that to turn here, that our
Yep.
parking garage is behind this big building, right? So that it's obvious for them. And then we're working on some plans that will let them know that there is capacity, a green or a red sign.
Yeah, those are
in the
great. The
exterior.
signage outside that says
Yeah.
197 spaces, half a block this way
Yeah.
or whatever. Those signs
Yeah.
are great. Yeah.
Yep. So anyway, we're it's a good problem to have, but it is a real problem.
Yeah, that's good. It's funny that the habit of people, and this is almost universal across the United States, is they look for on-street parking first. They'll do a couple of blocks. Maybe somebody left by the time we were there 30 seconds ago, so they'll go back around. Then they'll go through surface lots and drive through those. And the last thing people go to is often the deck. So it's changed my behavior. When I go to downtowns, I'll often just go to the deck and park. And just because I know I'm going to end up there anyway eventually. So, but that's a human pattern. So if you find a way to get good at doing that, let me know, because that's a huge rollout. Any other parking issues?
Yeah, one of the issues unique to us is La Grange Road. We've got this parking garage on the east side of La Grange Road, but La Grange Road sort of serves as almost like a river, if you will. And people tend to,
Right.
if they want to go on the west side of La Grange Road, they don't think I'm going to park on the east side
right.
and then just walk across the street. So that's one of the unique things we have to try to tackle too. And I'm not sure how the zoning code might help us do that, but that's just another unique feature of the village.
Of La Grange. That's interesting. Parking, it is an interesting component of a downtown success or not. And what you've figured out, I remember when the deck was built and some of the surface lots were done on the west side. Historic downtowns, the buildings occupy almost all the parcel. There may be a couple of spaces in the back for employees or whoever owns the building. But in order for a downtown to be successful, a historic downtown, the municipality has to get into the parking game. They have to provide the parking in some way, shape, or form for the businesses, because the businesses can't. You get out into more of a suburban or a corridor model of commercial, and you provide parking on your site. That's not an option downtown, so it's a tricky thing. So, any other issues related to parking? The other trend we're seeing nationally is parking maximums, not parking minimums. So you eliminate these seas of parking, and it does a couple things. The best way to sort of think about it is like a Walgreens comes into a corner store or a CVS, and the CVS comes in and they build their 12,000 square foot typical footprint. They're allowed to, they need to have, let's say, 28 parking spaces. They go on the site, they build their thing. They do the minimum 5-foot landscaping strip around the edge. They have their building, they just pave everything else. And they could end up with 48 parking spaces because they just stripe what they've paved over. They've met the landscaping perimeter, they've met the minimum, but nothing that says there's a maximum. But stormwater runoff, it looks ugly. And if you said, hey, you're required to have 24, you can go 10 or 20% above that, but that's it. And then that remaining space gets landscaped or in turf or ground cover. So stormwater runoff is diminished. The site begins to look a lot better. It's already above what your minimum is. And so there are ways to combat in areas or uses where you think you might have a pattern of historically excessive parking areas. There are ways to combat that developers are like, yeah, that's fine. And without stating, put in more landscaping, you maximize parking, you get more landscaping. So There are things like that that really are helpful. Anything else on parking? All right. This is what I think is one of the most important ones. This is the development review process. And I'm really going to ask, again, the village board as well, but plan commission, when people come to you, or staff, when people come to you and they've applied for something, a conditional use, a variation or variance, or a rezoning request, or a plan development, or what are the things you are hearing about people who have to navigate the procedures in the code to get something approved? Is it working well? Is it not working well? Do you find yourself at the dais saying, like, why don't we request this because it would be so helpful when we determined if this is appropriate or not, but we're not getting this from the applicant? Are there administrative procedures from your perspectives, because ultimately these things get to you, are the administrative procedures and requirements working well from your perspective, from how you see it and what you're hearing from the applicant?
I hate to be the one who has so much to say, but yes is the answer to that. I think if you come in and you serve on a commission and you're on the ZBA or the plan, there's code that seems to me written in 1905. You know, it's very legal language. It's hard to understand. I think new commissioners don't always ask as many questions, so I'd like to do two things: clarify that, see if we can modernize the language.
Okay.
I know it's pretty common throughout towns, but there's got to be a better example, so it's really, really clear, especially for new people coming on board, and that I'd like to encourage that the village do more training with every commissioner as they come into a commission routinely, several times a year, with examples of what's happening in communities around them, of how boards voted or didn't vote based on different number of factors.
Okay.
So I think that would really help, in terms of getting things through, so that we have some pretty seasoned boards right now, but there's always turnover.
Right.
And then on that note, we've talked about it, but we haven't really had a serious conversation, but to speed things up and to be efficient for both staff time and the applicants, I really like to give serious consideration to combining our plan commission and our ZBA. And I know a lot of towns do that. We don't. That would be something that I think we should certainly discuss.
Okay, that's good, that's good. Anybody else have any observations from the process or administration side of the code? It's something that we often see when we meet with business and owners, developers, architects. They often have a lot to say about it. I remember I was probably 3 years into being a planner so this goes back a long time. I was in Illinois, and I was sitting in a dais. I was trying to make sense at a meeting of the code, and it was brutal. And in prep, I had looked at probably 14 other codes, and I leaned over to the lawyer who was there serving the plan commission as the, not in-house counsel, and I leaned over and I said, I'm convinced that some horrible law firm wrote a horrible code in 1977, and it was garbage, and everybody adopted it. And she looked at me and she goes, I think my firm wrote that code. and she wasn't joking. And so a lot of that sort of remnant unnecessary complication exists. The most important thing in this is fair certainty. Applicants need to know what is expected. They need to know ahead of time so there's no surprises. When you're up at the dais, you need to know you have a complete packet. Staff needs to be able to navigate and administer this thing. I view a lot of zoning code updates. I'll tell you right now, one of my biases is to write it from the perspective of staff administering this thing, because they have to make it work. You guys adopt it, and you see it at the dais. They put up with it every day, and it's got to work, right? And so I look at it through the lens of administration a lot, and I think a lot of codes don't. So we'll write you a good one. Any other thoughts on administration or procedures? And I guess this is the point here about anything else that you think is something, this is the opportunity to take a look at it. Again, most times when cities or villages are looking at the code, it is in reaction to something, right? Something went awry, or something is a problem, so you're doing an amendment, a strategic strike to fix a section of the code, or state law changed again, so we got to amend the code for group homes, or whatever. But this is your chance to do a wholesale, comprehensive, let's get the whole thing right and really get it dialed in. So it works for residents, protects the neighborhood character, It works for architects, builders, developers, staff, plan commission, and village board. I guess let me ask this. Do you all perceive La Grange to be a business-friendly community? Do you think you're an easy place to get development approved, an easy place to do business? Just your gut feeling. Where do you think the pulse is out there in the world?
I would say that we're easy to get, for our staff, works well with the businesses. We have rules, and so, you know, for example, we don't allow dispensaries. We don't allow video poker. I get called frequently from people saying, "Oh, I'm working as a consultant for video poker. If you allow this in," and I say, you know, we don't have interest in that. We've already considered it, and we're not doing it. So there's things that we don't allow. Does that make us difficult? I don't know. But I do think we do a good job when the either people inquire about our staff. Would this be a use that fits your code? Is there property available? And then with the inspections and things like that, it's something in the last 5 years we've tried to work on improving the process.
Okay. Yeah, if no dispensaries and no video poker makes you a difficult community, I love me some difficult community because I think that's great. So just keep holding that line.
I think, you know, we have an older code. I think our staff does a really good job of implementing what we have, and our commissions and our boards interpret it and do with it what we can. But I think this is a really good endeavor to be taking, because I think we can take, as a large group with the community, a better look at how we do things and open up a bit. I think we're generally perceived as a very healthy, great town to do business in. But there are some people who are a little hesitant to come forward because, again, as President Kugler said, there's some things we don't allow. We have a high bar, high standard, and we should. But I think there's a little bit of a, you know, we aren't open to some new things, certain new types of businesses yet, maybe, or flexible on certain things that we allow businesses to do currently.
Right. And I think hard standards or high standards, but clear standards, that's better than low standards that are ambiguous. That's brutal. So people can deal with clarity, even if they're strict rules. They can deal with that all day long. I think that's great. So any other issues before we sort of go on to the next thing? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was happy to see on your sustainable design that you're talking about stormwater management, because I live by the bowl, and I live where the one of the most significant areas of flooding in the village. And so I think that has to also be part of all of the discussion as to where we, or how land is developed in the community, and we have to continue to prioritize it.
Oh, absolutely. That's a crucial lens to look through. You don't solve that problem with one fell swoop. That's an incremental solution, and the collective impact of policy implemented in different ways provide a big impact to try to mitigate flooding issues. So I agree 100%. We can take a look at that big time. I think that's great. All right, let's go on to the next. So the next steps, again, zoning code update. We have an open house that was announced. It is next week at 6 o'clock. Is it going to be in this room?
Yes.
All right. 6 o'clock to 7:30. This is a chance to talk with the consultant team, to talk with staff, to walk around and see what it is we're thinking about, to get your ideas on what are issues for you. Again, we're not at the point in the process where we're recommending what you should do. We're just starting. We're listening to what you think we ought to be looking at. It's your code. It has to work for La Grange. It has to work for all the stakeholders in La Grange. And our job, the only horse we have in this race, is to deliver that code in 18 months. That's our only objective, right? So this will be the first of the open public forums to begin to get input, is at that open house. So if you're here tonight, please come to that. Bring your neighbors, bring your friends, bring your ideas, bring your thoughts, and let's have some conversations and see if, when this thing gets adopted, you can look back and see your influence and see your fingerprints on it. And that's very important to us. So
I know this tonight was geared really for the board and the plan commission to get together. The open house is really geared for the public.
Correct.
But I'm confused as to whether the board and the plan commission are supposed to attend next week, not attend, up to the individual.
Good question. Whenever we have, and this is true whether we do planning or zoning, whenever we have a public event, a workshop, a visioning workshop, an open house, elected and appointed officials or steering committee members, if that's what's going on in the community, of course they can attend. We can't say you shouldn't or can't. And this is an open house. People might drop in, drop out, right? But there's an advantage to providing third-party perspective. We can talk about things theoretically or anecdotally. We've been in meetings sometimes where elected officials may insist on coming to like a workshop, like where we actually get into like dialogue with it for an hour and a half. And instead of a resident talking to us, I might turn around and say, Carl, how come you guys approved this 2 years ago? And so you can, of course, attend anything. There's going to be a lot of one-on-one conversations at the open house. It's not a presentation. They'll have stations, a lot of discussions. We'll be taking feedback and thoughts and issues and comments. But at any event we do for the public, the village board, the plan commission are always allowed to participate and attend. But if you don't feel as though you've missed something, because we meet with you throughout at every step along the way. We have, I think, 4+ open houses, but we have a different level of discussion here than we would at like an open house. It's a different format. And anything we hear at any event, open house, workshop, focus group, interviews, we bring back to this group what we heard. And we summarize it, document it, and we record it on the website. So you know what was talked about. So you can come if you want to. If you don't want to, you don't have to. You will not be missing anything by not attending.
Can you just explain, because I wasn't aware, you said put it on the website. Is this a specific website for this, or what?
Yes, so we will have, I'm Nicole. I've met with some of you guys. There is a project website that has more information about the project overall. The QR code on the last slide, Kevin, if you want to go back, this QR code will actually take you to the website, and so it'll have information about the project, information about upcoming events, and then it'll have the summary and presentation materials. So this PowerPoint will be put on the website.
So is the website live now?
Yes.
It is live and it's on the village website. If you go to lagrangeisle.gov, under the Community Development Department, you'll see the zoning code update project website link.
Click on it, and you go to survey dates of when the next events are, everything. Whenever we do anything, it'll go on the website. So it's anything we do goes up there, everything.
There's also a comment area where you can add feedback, and that'll be sent to staff so that we're aware of any public feedback.
And Clerk Saladino just brought up, again, the Open Meetings Act, and maybe we can get our attorney, Benjamin Schuster, just to communicate with both the board and the Plan Commission. If you are planning to go to the meeting, how many people can gather? I don't know if it's considered an open meeting because it's an open house, or what the rules are. So it does add another wrinkle to if the board and commission do come to these things.
We can certainly ask Ben to send an email with guidance to everyone who was here tonight and those who couldn't make it. As with the comprehensive planning public workshops, trustees attended some of those as well. And I believe the advice at the time was for trustees to not gather in groups, or plan commissioners to not gather in groups and have conversations amongst yourselves. You certainly are welcome to talk with the other residents that are there at the meeting and attend the meeting, as John mentioned.
The open houses are nice because, well, you've been to open houses. I mean, people can walk around, they can go over to like a board where we got some diagrams or some issues or some maps, and Jessica might be standing there, and they're like, Ma, can you explain whatever? I live in this neighborhood, and I've got some issues with flooding down over here, or parking gets really bad over here around this grocery store, and we'll have comment cards, we'll be summarizing things, but it's just a lot of one-on-one conversations with people to find out what is or isn't working, or what their issues are that they want us to know about, and we can clarify. A lot of people aren't literate around zoning. It's not exactly something people do for fun, and we can answer some questions. So it's a pretty casual, very informal. It's an hour and a half time. You can come for the full hour and a half. You can come for 5 minutes, ask Nicole a couple of questions, and then leave. It's just a window of time. So.
Similar to the comprehensive plan, can we blast that out, the advertisement on social media for the village to make sure that people see it and who don't go to the website regularly?
Sure, it went out today
Oh, good.
on social media, and then we'll plan to post it at least 2 more times before the open house next week.
Some people don't think zoning ordinance updates are as fun as comprehensive planning. I don't know what they're thinking, but it's some pretty good conversations.
And you probably will, but just at the open house, if there's a zoning map, I think it helps. When you talk, you know, and I hear R6, I'm like, yeah, I couldn't, without looking at the map, I can't tell you the borders of the R6.
100%. There will be a big zoning map, and one of the things we often do for planning, we can do for zoning as well, is if you own a business, you can put a little dot on your business, or if you live in a neighborhood, if you want to, you can put it on your house or at the intersection closest to your house if you want to indicate the neighborhood. But if people want to, they can kind of let us know where they're coming from, so we can make sure that there's representation and where we're getting feedback from. So, but you're right, we need a big, easy to read, not little, big map of the village that explains all this stuff. Yeah. So I think that's it. So again, the next steps are we're going to be going into the open house next week, and then we move into sort of step 3. And step 3 is where we begin to really get into your code and look at the good, the bad, the ugly against what we think is good practice or things that aren't being done well. We'll compare it to some other like communities where we think there might be examples of what you might want to consider. And then we will include a preliminary recommendations report. And that will identify the types of things in the areas of the code that we think need attention, and some preliminary recommendations on things we will start to work on to address those. This will be the first meeting with you where you will not receive material in advance. All right? This is a working group. This isn't sort of like a get together and see a presentation and not participate group. This is a working group. So going forward, at least a week before the meeting, you will get a packet, and it'll be something that we would hope that you would review, mark up, write your questions or comments, and when we come here and work through it, we work through it, right? And we will have worked through it with staff before it gets to you, but you will get homework, if you will, before we meet, so we can have conversations about what it is you're looking at. The next thing you will get from us when we meet is an existing analysis code. So we'll analyze your existing code, a diagnostic, and then we will include a section called a preliminary recommendations report that tells you what we think based off of what we heard and what we've examined, what we think the code changes need to preliminarily be considering. And that'll be the next thing you get. That's probably 2-3 months, a couple months, something like that. So there's not a date for that meeting yet, but that'll be the next thing you get.
Thanks, John. And thank you for the House of Levine staff, all the hard work to get us to this point. We do appreciate it. Again, with our staff, we appreciate all your hard work. We know that you worked real hard for tonight and going forward, really, to give us this foundation. Thanks to the Planning Commission for coming out, and to the board, Clerk Saladino for coming out. I do appreciate it. We need to have 2 motions. I'll lead the board motion, and then I'll have our chairperson lead for a motion on the Planning Commission. That's to adjourn. So with the board, I would ask the village board, all in favor of adjourning this meeting at, we'll say 7:30, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And tonight's board meeting is adjourned. And I'll kick it to the Planning Commission.
Okay, for the Plan Commission, is there a motion to adjourn? Is it seconded? It's been moved to second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned.
Great. Thank